Say, bruh, the Lakers lost. Not shocking, but it happened. First of all, welcome to Sports R Us. And before we get started, everybody go ahead and smash that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe. And make sure you leave some comments if you agree with anything or if you disagree with anything. Let's start and spark up some conversations and just speak about the sports world and what's going on, especially currently within the NBA. So, 2 nights ago, the Lakers was eliminated from the playoffs. This was the first time that in his career that LeBron James was eliminated in the first round, making him 14-1 as it pertains to the first round. Now, this isn't shocking whatsoever. One of my previous videos that I did was about my NBA bracket, and just in full transparency and to be honest, I wasn't confident in my bracket. Majority of my bracket that I did make was by me being a LeBron James fan and by me being a fan of the Lakers, wanting them to win by way of LeBron James. I pushed them to win the NBA Finals. But anybody that has been watching the Lakers this year, anybody that has seen just one game, 2 games, if you only seen a few quarters of the Lakers playing, you can see that the cohesiveness and the chemistry between the team wasn't there. Not only that, they had 2 major injuries that happened this year. Of course, you had Anthony Davis, who has been consistently injured throughout his career, but suffered a big-time injury. Almost could have had a full-blown ACL tear, but it was only a bruise. But he was out for a large amount of the actual season, along with LeBron James, who, by way of Solomon Hill, had a high ankle sprain to his right ankle. And that was evident. As soon as LeBron James came back, when they said that he was coming back to the court, I remember he made a post a few weeks prior to that saying that a storm was coming. I did not believe it. Or maybe I'm lying. I believed it because, like I said before, I am a LeBron James fan. So me knowing LeBron James before, I know that when he puts things out online, most of the time he means that and he wants that to happen, right? So when I saw that, of course, I was looking at it and saying, all right, well, he's going to come back. But something in my mind was telling me that a high ankle sprain isn't that easy to come back from. Now, if anybody knows about Ricky Williams was a running back who was drafted by the New Orleans Saints back in the early 2000s. And he had a high ankle sprain. And that high ankle sprain actually hindered him from being the player that everybody thought that he was going to be in the NFL. He still had a pretty good career, but overall, him being that high value player and him being that big time player that he was supposed to be coming out of college, he wasn't able to have, and that was mainly because of that high ankle sprain. And when LeBron James came back initially, playing in the first game, I was looking at him saying, I don't know. Second game, looking at him saying, I don't know. Third game, you're like, okay, this is going to be a little bit different, because you could tell I've been watching LeBron James long enough. Watched him since he came in, watching when he was in high school, when the games was coming on ESPN. I've been watching LeBron James long enough to know exactly his style of play and understand how he likes to come off of his ankle, the way that he talks his body, the way that he utilizes his feet in order to get into the paint, and different things like that. He wasn't able to do that. And by me peeping that within the first few games, I understood that, yeah, he's not 100%. And when he said he wasn't going to get back to 100% in his career, I believed him, because just like he said on the shop, of course, as soon as you start playing basketball, you're not 100%. But then when you accumulate different injuries, and LeBron James, of course, we see him as Iron Man. He hasn't shown any injuries. I believe that there's been injuries over years. that he's been having, but he hasn't allowed it to go out on the floor. This was the first time we were seeing him really go down. So we'll fast forward all the way over to the playing game. When they played against the Warriors, and you watch LeBron James play basketball, you can tell that he couldn't go inside, and he was shooting a bunch of jumpers. Now, historically, LeBron James hasn't been the best jump shooter. He has moments where he's streaky. He'll go on and hit certain jump shots consistently, and you'll feel as if this is something that's going to keep on going on. But the one thing that he always had, just in case that wasn't working, which he can fill out in the beginning of a game, is him to go inside. Him to go inside to gain that momentum, to gain that confidence, to go back out and say, okay, I can hit this now because now I've given you multiple shots in the inside. And that was something that you did not see when it came down to him playing in the play-in game. The first game, them coming back within the Los Angeles, playing in the playoffs, you were able to see that the team didn't have any chemistry whatsoever. And that multiple players didn't know exactly where they were supposed to be. There was multiple times in the playoffs when we were watching games that you were seeing that the normal pass that LeBron James likes in the inside, multiple players on the team couldn't execute it. Multiple players on the team didn't know exactly where to be on the floor. It's like everybody was confused. It's almost like when you're in a crowded party and you kind of like, you're like, man, should I stand over here, so I could be out of everybody's way just to get in the cut? Or am I going to be in everybody's way? And it seems like everybody else on the floor was second guessing themselves at all times. In a championship team, there's no second guessing. It's just the floor of the game is happening. Things are happening. When you have that cohesion, when you have that chemistry, you can see it. And one of the biggest things that I saw when I was watching the game was that they didn't have that cohesion. And that, to me, I felt even at the top of the season, I felt like when the Lakers were making moves prior to the season opening, I believe that they made all the wrong moves. I believe that the team that they had last year, even if you couldn't bring every single person back, there were some key components that I felt needed to be brought back no matter what. I believe either JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard needed to come back. I just believe that was key. I did not believe in Marc Gasol. I believe that Marc Gasol is 2 to 3 years behind any capabilities of giving you anything on the floor. I wanted Marc Gasol. I remember when LeBron James used to play for the Heat and Marc Gasol was doing this thing. I was like, man, Marc Gasol would be a nice addition to LeBron James at that time. That was also around 2011, 12, 13. So it was a totally different time. And now Marc Gasol is more of a player that needs to be cut out. He's not somebody that you sign to his team and say that he's going to make a big change. He's not going to make that big change for you. So I just felt like that was a misstep on the Lakers' part by letting JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard go and trying to replace that with Marc Gasol and Montrezl Harrell and not really getting Montrezl Harrell within the fold. I believe that was a terrible move. And so what we're seeing for next year, now that the Lakers is lost, now that LeBron James has suffered his first loss, which I say at the end of the day, there's some accountability on LeBron James' part, but there's a huge accountability as it pertains to the Los Angeles Lakers as an organization and the moves that they made in the offseason. I believe that there's a lot of players. Everybody try to make it seem as if it's one player that can make people win championships or that can bring you to the promised land. You always have to have some type of role player. Even if it's a different role player in each game, you need certain role players that's going to come in and give you formidable numbers. Now, they don't have to give you 30 points, but if you can get a role player that can give you, consistently between 13 to 18 points, then that's good. That can help out someone who's trying to figure out and who's still injured and trying to figure out the way that they can play with this injury. You saw the frustration on LeBron James' face throughout every single game. And you did not see, like I said once again, the cohesion. You didn't see the cohesion with the teams. Anthony Davis was not 100%. I believe when he came back and he had those big time games, those games was aberrations. Of course, he's amazing and he's a great player. But I believe that his injuries, when you're watching somebody like Anthony Davis, you're praying that he does not go down. And I think the unknowing of if he's going to be healthy or not, that's something that played on the mind of the players that were on the Lakers, because at times they didn't know exactly if they were going to be in the starting lineup. Would they have to play for Anthony Davis, or would they get certain minutes? I think it was big time confusion within the coaching staff on which rotations they wanted to play. They tried multiple things. You can see that there weren't any confidence in the players that they had on the floor, even down to LeBron James. I believe that LeBron James didn't really have too much confidence within any players that were on the floor with him. There were multiple times he was giving players wide open threes and they weren't executing. They weren't striking. They weren't hitting at all. And that's not something that LeBron James is used to. LeBron James is used to setting up players and them cashing in. It doesn't have to be consistently, but it has to be to a percentage to where he can still, okay, if they're not giving me this amount, I'm going to do the rest, but they still giving me 30 to 40% of the workload that they can do as a collective, as the rest of the team. And you didn't see that cohesion. You saw injured LeBron James go up against a team like Phoenix and look pitiful. Pretty much. The full team just looked pitiful. It looked like they had no chemistry, like they didn't go over the same plays, like they never practiced together, like these guys didn't even know each other, to be honest with you. And that's what we saw in the playoffs. And looking forward for the next season, we're seeing that we have multiple players that are still in contract. We have LeBron James, who's in contract. We're not going to worry about that. We have Anthony Davis, who's in contract. Of course, he just signed a brand new deal, so he's in contract. They have him for an additional 4 years beyond this year that just passed. Caldwell Pope, they have him for 2 more years. They have him next year. They have Kyle Kuzma for the next 3 years. They have Montrezl Harrell for next season. They have Marc Gasol for next season. And they also have McKinnon for 2 additional seasons. Now, everybody else is not in contract. And someone who we saw within these playoffs, someone that we thought that we would be able to rely on, was Dennis Schroeder. And what we're seeing is that Dennis Schroeder is not reliable. He's not a consistent player in that manner. And he was looking for a $100 million contract. I don't believe that the Lakers are going to sign him to that. I believe that the Lakers are going to look to make multiple deals this offseason. They don't really have too much wiggle room as it pertains to making big deals. So some of these things are going to have to be either sign or trades, or miraculously finding a way to sell a team on Kyle Kuzma or somebody like Caldwell Pope, or maybe Marc Gasol, maybe buying that contract out by next season or midway through next season. Maybe this is something where they bring back a lot of players, but then they make a big deal, a big time trade at the top of the season or towards the trade deadline. Maybe that's something that they can do. But right now, they're really restricted as it pertains to their cap room, because they have 2 major players that they're paying, which LeBron James, who's getting 41 next year. We have Anthony Davis, who's getting 35. So you already have a huge chunk of your salary cap. And not that the Lakers are scared to go into the luxury tax, but on a lot of these things, it's going to be hard to sell some teams in order to make trades. And you won't be able to sign any players in free agency outright, those major players that you'll need in order to take some of the workload off of LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So I feel that the Lakers have to, of course, within the next month or so, they have time in order to think. Prior to free agency, they still have 3 more rounds of the playoffs. You have the NBA draft that has to come up, and then you'll have the free agency that'll come up. So that'll be a good enough time to give them time to think and strategize on what they need. I think Frank Vogel, I don't think that Frank Vogel needs to be fired. He just won a championship, and this was a quick turnaround season. But I do think that his strength is more within defense. Defense comes down to effort. The one thing about this team is that he wasn't able to motivate these guys towards the end of the season to give him that effort. So that's something that he would have to work on. Offensively, I believe that if they were to make any type of change, Jason Kidd was one of the main people that they wanted to have as the head coach. Of course, he's the assistant head coach. I wouldn't see that as a bad thing with them switching over to that. With them switching over to Jason Kidd being the main player or being the main head coach. I don't see that being a problem. But I believe that they're going to give Frank Vogel another year just to see exactly what he can do. But if he can galvanize those guys and get them motivated to play defense and to help LeBron James out more within these last 2 seasons, then they're going to be in big time trouble. Of course, there's a lot of talk. People are looking at Dame Lillard saying that they can make a move towards getting Dame Lillard. But I do not see Portland making a trade for any of the players that the Lakers will be willing to give up. Which the 2 players that it won't give up is LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But anybody beyond that, I don't see Portland making a deal for that. And I also don't believe that the Lakers have too many draft picks to where they can make a deal that's enticing enough for Portland to say, let me send this over to the Lakers. So it would have to be like extreme circumstances where Dame Lillard would have to come out and literally say, I do not want to be a part of the Portland Trail Blazers. But I'm going to have a whole nother video about that, about what I feel like Dame Lillard need to do at this point in his career, because he is 31 at this point, and he's still playing at a high level, and that's a player that I would like to see win a championship. So I'm going to have a totally different video about that. But like I said in the beginning of the video, everybody like, comment, and subscribe. This is Sports R Us. Let me know what you think at the bottom, and keep on watching. Appreciate y'all.